Can you remember anything good about your mother?
Yes.
What do you remember that's good about your mother?
I remember Christmases. Her, she was always up, it seemed, and she would be up when I got up, and she would take us down to open the presents, even though my dad would sleep in. So we got to do that. That was usually a nice day. And I remember her taking care of the birds that would hit the window. Especially in Muncie, the birds would hit the window and be kind of like hurt or wounded in some way. And she would put them in a special cage she had for birds that did that. And she was just amazing with the birds. And I remember watching.
Did you love your mom and dad?
Yes.
And on August 20th, 1989, did you and your brother kill your mother and father?
Yes.
Did you kill them for money? Is that no?
No.
Did you kill them because you wanted to pay them back for the way they had treated you?
Excuse me, I reject that young lady.
Overruled. No.
Why did you kill your parents?
Because we were afraid.
Do you have a lot of nice memories from your childhood?
No.
Did you get to spend time at your grandparents' house?
Yes.
And was this your father's mother and father? Is that yes?
Yes.
What was good about being at your grandparents' house?
Everything was good about it. My grandmother was wonderful. And we stayed in bed all day and watched TV. And, just be like a never-ending stream of foods that we weren't supposed to eat. We watched my grandfather would come in whenever the Untouchables came on. We would watch that, and it would be a big deal. And then we'd go out, and the house was great. She had a magnolia tree outside. We'd climb up that, play with her in that, and there'd be a little patio that was enclosed, and squirrels would be jumping from tree to tree, and my grandfather would laugh and tell us stories, and we'd watch that. We'd go to garage sales with my grandmother.
Was
I think
this,
there's lots of things.
was this different from the life you had in your own home?
It's like a different world from my house.
And once you moved to Muncie, did sports become an important part of your life?
Well, they were everything to my dad, and that was my whole life at that time.
And was doing what your father wanted of you important?
That's what made him happy, and that's what I wanted to do.
Why did you want to make him happy?
So he would love me.
What's the first sport you remember getting involved in on an organized basis?
Swimming.
Can I have the Lotus photograph? How old were you when you started swimming?
I think 4 years old.
And was this just a matter of going to the pool and swimming for fun, or was this more organized?
No, we had a coach, and my mom would take us. And in the winters, we would go indoors and practice with the older kids. Or actually, that was just me at that point. Eventually, my brother and I.
And is this something where you had a half-hour lesson every week, or was it more frequent than that?
In the summer, it was every day, and in the spring, probably almost every day. But in the winter, it was whenever the classes were. The practices was just like 3 times a week. And then sometimes my dad would take me on his own.
Now, when your dad would take you on his own, was it the same type of training session that you'd have with swimming teachers, or was it different?
It was very different because swimming, basically the coach just is calling out the laps or the kind of things that you should do, and he might occasionally come over and help someone that's having a problem with a particular stroke or something of that sort. But with my dad, it was very, it was one-on-one, and he'd stay in the pool with me and swim next to me, and sometimes we would play, or it would just be him and I for, usually they gave you an hour. It was like hour free time swimming, and I would take that time to train with my dad.
And were these good times for you or bad times?
Sometimes it was good.
And sometimes it was bad? And what was it like when it was bad?
Well, I didn't really like the swimming. And sometimes he was rough with the swimming.
What do you mean he was rough with the swimming?
Sexual arousal.
I'm sorry?
Sexual arousal.
Overruled. You may ask your question.
It was like they were just drills, and I would swim laps, and sometimes he would just yank me out of the water by my hair, and he would shake you, and he took it very, very seriously. He was training to be an Olympic swimmer at one point, and so he had all kinds of different methods and how to expand your lungs and how long I should be able to hold my breath. And we practiced him holding me under the water, how long I could take it.
What do you mean how long you could take it? Would he say, I'm going to hold you under for 30 seconds and then you go under, or what would that be like?
We would go under, and I would fight him to get air, and then he would give me air. And we would keep doing that, and I would be able to do it less and less time. And it was very rough. And
What do you mean you would fight him to get air?
I would just push away from him or pinch him or do whatever I could, hit him underwater. My dad was unaffected by all that, so it didn't. That's what he wanted me to do. He wanted me to fight to get air so that I could go beyond what I would normally just take if he said stay underwater as long as you could. And this would expand my lungs. And there were other things that made it, for me, rough. And I just was so nervous about swimming. It wasn't just my dad either. Just the practices themselves made me very nervous. The older kids the guy would be blowing whistles, and you would have to dive in. And I didn't like the water. It was always very cold, and it was, for some reason, I didn't like it.
When your dad would hold you under and make you fight to get air, how would you feel when you finally got up to the surface?
Just relieved to get air.
Would you physically have any effects?
I would be crying. This would be very rough, like I said. And
What did your dad do when you'd come up crying?
take a short break. We usually wait 30 seconds or so. We'd do it again.
And how many times would you do these lung expanding exercises?
that way we wouldn't do it too many times, and we would try to do it a couple times a week, and then we would test a couple times a week if I could go farther, like swim a whole lap underwater and then come back, and how far I would get, and we would try to go farther.
And what ages were you when these exercises were going on?
I'm not sure, but by between 6 and till about 10, I would say, maybe a little bit longer.
And do you have any other memories of swimming that are painful for you?
The whole thing was very bad for me, and mostly I remember pleading with my mother not to take me, stalling so I would be late, incredible stomach aches, I think from nerves, where I would be nauseous and I would vomit.
What would your mom say when you'd ask her to not make you go?
She would just say, "Get ready, let's go," and she would always threaten me with telling my dad. But when it came to the swimming, I was pretty resistant. I didn't seem to care as much as I did normally. I was pretty crazed about the swimming. It made me so nauseous and nervous. The drilling, the intensity, the underwater stuff was very hard for me. I remember purposely swimming into the wall in practice so that I would be injured, so that the coach would say, "Okay, you can sit in the locker room and miss the afternoon sessions." And I would do all kinds of things, anything to get out of it.
Did you start playing soccer at some point in time?
Yes.
How old were you?
I was, I don't know, my grandfather was out there with my dad, working with me by the time I was 5 also.
Did you like soccer?
I really like soccer.
How long did you play soccer?
Until I was in my 11 years old, between almost 12.
Was your dad as involved in your soccer playing as he was in your swimming?
Yes.
And what kind of involvement did you have? Or did he have with your soccer? Just coming to the games, or was he more involved in that?
No, my dad was there whenever I played soccer, which we usually reserved for when he was there, because it was technical for him. He had a certain way he wanted me to play, and didn't feel it was productive for me just to be kicking a ball around when he wasn't there. So soccer, I waited till he was around.
Now, when you were playing soccer, I presume there was a coach?
Not when I was 5, but eventually there was, by the time I was 7, I would think.
And once you were on an organized team with a coach, did your dad's involvement stop?
No.
Well, how would your dad behave when you were playing organized soccer?
In practices, he would be very involved, and the coaches would allow that. Pretty much it would be like a private lesson with him, and then the team was playing also. He would be yelling things from the sidelines. Sometimes he would come out and grab me and take me off the field and talk to me, put me back in, and the coaches would pretty much ignore him, both of us, and we would play. And I was getting a lot of extra training, and so I was at a level where it seemed like that was why the coaches would be tolerating that, because I would be one of the better players when the game started, and a big help to the team. So they basically just let my dad do what he wanted to do. And,
Did you get to be friends with the other kids on the team?
no, not really.
Why not?
My dad didn't want that.
Why not?
It's just part of his philosophy. If I started becoming friendly with these other players, I wouldn't be competitive.
If the if your team lost, would they all get together and go to the pizza parlor afterwards, even though they lost?
They would.
Did
often.
you get to go?
No.
What was your dad's philosophy about that?
He was very belittling of the coach for allowing and the players to be going to pizza parlors to hang out after a loss. And he believed all through sports that the people that win are the ones that hate losing. And the idea that there would be smiles on kids' faces after they lost a game was really, he's just outrageous to him. And if I even went near anybody or, you know, I had to look and would purposely look pretty devastated after matches, pretty similar to that picture that my dad would be satisfied, because he would be very angry.
Did your dad take losing a soccer game when you're 8 years old as seriously?
It was very serious to him.
Why?
Well, partly because what I said before, he had his own dreams and he wanted me to achieve those, and because I was the most important thing in his life. And what I did was serious.
Why were you the most important thing in his life?
I don't know, that's just the way it was.
Did it have something to do with your place in the family, or was your brother as important to him as you were?
No. My brother was unimportant.
How could you
He
tell
pretty
that?
much believed in, well, he did believe that the firstborn was the one that carried the line. I carried my dad and his dad and his dad and his dad's first name, Joseph or Jose. And that was really all he cared about. And to some degree, I felt that was similar feelings from my grandparents and everybody around, that the focus seemed to be on me, and that might be partly because my dad's focus was on me, but I'm not really sure why else.
So you got a lot more attention than your brother, is that right?
Well, I had his complete attention, and I don't think my brother, I didn't even think about my brother really didn't even exist for me until later in life. I don't think either of us thought about Eric too much.
So he was just ignored.
He was not completely ignored. Dad would interact with him and be harsh with him at times, play with him at times in ways that he didn't with me. Just didn't seem to be very concerned with what was happening with Eric. He might, if he was in a bad mood, he might slap Eric or push Eric away. If he was in a good mood, he might hang out with Eric. But it was different. Like, I had to be doing something. I was achieving something or something of importance. And it was very different.
So you had more attention. Would you say there were more expectations of you also?
Definitely.
Was one of the things that your father made decisions about with regard to your sports training the food that you would eat?
Yes.
And throughout your childhood, did his ideas about the proper foods change?
Not too much. I mean, it was always very important to him.
Okay. And what was the instruction with regard to food? Were you told what you could eat?
Yes.
Were you told when you could eat it?
No, I mean, there were some meals he felt it depended on what was happening that day. If there was a practice, it would be 3 hours before. He wouldn't tolerate 2.5 hours, it would be 3. And then there would be certain foods involved. And if there wasn't a practice and I was just going to school, I would just know the things that I had to stay away from or I had to eat. Or
Such as?
stay away from sugar, dairy products. That changed because there were times when dairy products were a big thing. It depended on what he was reading, whatever was in the literature. If it was the Eat to Win diet, if it was something else. Usually he had books that would list what you have for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and then like strategies for how early. But he changed his philosophy a lot, because I remember him reading about Pancho Gonzalez would fast during the tournament. And so I did that for a period of time where I would just not eat for 12 hours at a time, have a small meal, not eat all day again. That wasn't working very well, so we switched.
How old were you when you were doing the Pancho Gonzalez fasting program?
13, when I was just becoming real competitive.
And you were playing a lot of tennis at that time, I take it.
Yes,
How many hours?
It was only tennis at that point.
How many hours a day were you playing tennis?
At 13?
Yes.
Probably like 45 hours a week.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear. 4 or 5 hours?
40 hours a week.
40 to 45 hours a week? And this is and you're 13 and you're going to school also? Yes?
Yes.
Now, did you sit down and talk with your dad about these food programs and sort of decide together what you were going to do in terms of your diet? Or did he decide?
I could pick out foods from the different categories.
When you said he wanted you to stay away from sugar, from junk food, that was an important theme with him, I take it.
Yes.
And if you violated that rule, would he enforce the rules?
Well, sometimes I violated the rule, yeah, and he would enforce the rules.
Was there a situation where you bought some food during the time you were playing soccer that you weren't supposed to buy?
Yes.
How old were you?
I was about 11, almost.
And what happened?
Is it at the Lawrenceville Deli? At the Lawrenceville Deli, we stopped there routinely on the way from or to the soccer fields from where our house was in Pennington. And my dad would be buying the things he felt he wanted for me, and the guy behind the counter was very friendly. They'd had the place forever, and he knew me every time I came in my soccer clothes. Basically, he sneaked me in a bag some pastries and cookies and stuff. He just sort of put it in with everything else my dad was buying, and I took it out when my dad wasn't looking.
Did your dad find him?
He
Yes.
found them on me outside the store.
Were you eating them?
I was eating them.
And what did your dad do?
He just grabbed them out of my hand.
And
He just grabbed me by the neck.
punched me in the stomach.
Just punched me in the stomach.
Did he say anything?
No, he dragged me to the car, and I don't believe that he said anything. And I knew what was obvious.
Excuse me, Your Honor, could you ask the witness to keep your voice up?
Yes, if you could speak up a little bit.
The picture that's up on the board with you in the yellow shirt, is that in the back seat of a car?
Yes.
And is that your father with you?
Yes.
And does that scene look familiar to you?
Yes.
After you played soccer, would your dad talk to you about what your performance had been?
Yes.
And was it supportive, like you did a great thing today, or I'm really proud of you, or what would be the tone of those conversations?
No, he didn't believe in that. We worked on different aspects of the game, what I could have done. There was always things that I could have done much better. Depended if we won or lost. If we had won, if I'd scored a goal or so, and usually in these games I would score a goal or do something significant probably, and we would just focus on the other things that I should have done better. It wouldn't be so bad.
You said your dad didn't believe in things like that when I asked you if you said complimentary things. What do you mean he didn't believe in things like that?
He just didn't believe in praise. He just felt that you just have to keep going to the next level of play so we could get to where we wanted to go. And that wasn't going to happen with wasting time, patting ourselves on the back, and just losing our focus on what we had as a goal. And so I never looked for praise.
Did you feel like there was a lot of pressure to live up to your dad's expectations?
Tremendous pressure.
Did you think you could ever meet his expectations?
No. And I don't think he felt I could either.
At some point, did you start playing tennis?
Yes.
And how old were you when you started playing tennis?
I started late, but I started about 6.
Do you recognize these photographs?
Yeah.
You were here when your cousin Alan Anderson testified
Right.
about playing tennis at the park. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he indicated when you first started playing, you couldn't hold a racket with one hand. Is that correct?
That's right.
Why?
Well, I was 6, and I wanted to use a junior racket. I'm actually using a junior racket in that picture, which John had at the club. And those are the types of things that John would do that my dad hated. He wanted me to use a full-size racket, and we
You
wrapped.
say he wanted you to use a full-size racket. Who wanted you to use a full-size
My
racket?
dad wanted me to use a full-size racket. And we would wrap the grip up a little bit higher, and I would hold the racket choked so that I could hold it
With two hands?
with 2 hands on both sides.
Were you too small to hold it?